Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into the blistering, chaotic, and emotionally charged final performance of the absolute pioneers of punk rock, the Ramones. It's a story packed with noise, tension, and a legacy that literally refused to just quietly fade away. So, let's kick things off with a massive question. When you've spent decades defining an entire genre of music, how exactly do you bow out? I mean, really, how does the most influential punk band in history say goodbye? Well, to understand the sheer velocity of this gig, just wrap your head around this number: 70. That represents 70 minutes of nonstop, deafening, sweat-drenched punk rock. No long pauses, no self-indulgent guitar solos, just pure, unadulterated adrenaline from the very second the house lights went down. And in that tiny 70-minute window, they blasted through an unbelievable 32 songs. Think about that for a second. The band was playing at an absolute fever pitch, taking classic tracks and squeezing them into just over a minute. They barely even stopped to catch a breath before bassist CJ Ramone would bark out the next 1, 2, 3, 4. You know what's really interesting, though? This legendary gig, their 2,263rd show, was actually supposed to happen at a brand new club called Billboard Live. But last-minute code enforcements pushed the gig down the street to the Palace in Hollywood. Talk about a chaotic start to a truly historic evening, right? Let's actually trace their steps on that fateful day, August 6th, 1996. We're starting on a sunny afternoon in LA at noon, fast-forwarding to the doors opening to a massive, buzzing crowd at 9 p.m., which all led up to the electric roar of the stage for that final, blistering performance at 10:30 p.m. But before the mosh pits and the crowd surfing kicked off, they actually spent their final afternoon immortalizing their hands in cement at Guitar Center's Rock Walk, right there on Sunset Boulevard. They signed a Fender guitar, totally surrounded by peers and fans. And get this, Pearl Jam's Eddie Vedder was just hanging around filming the whole thing on a Super 8 camera. Now, despite the looming retirement of his own band, Joey Ramone remained fiercely optimistic. He confidently declared to the radio press outside the venue that, quote, rock and roll was doing just fine. He truly believed in the vitality of the music right up to the very bitter end. And the sheer spectacle of the night, it was completely amplified by a parade of heavy-hitting guest stars rushing the stage just to pay their respects. We're talking original bassist Dee Dee Ramone, Lemmy from Motorhead, Tim and Lars from Rancid, and Chris and Ben from Soundgarden. They all jumped in to play while the band just kept racing right into the next song. And as a totally surreal cherry on top of this punk rock finale, Eddie Vedder stepped out onto the stage wearing a full rubber mask. He literally ripped it off to sing the chorus of the Dave Clark 5 cover, Any Way You Want It. It was just this highly spontaneous, utterly bizarre moment that fit the chaotic energy perfectly. But, the legacy of this gig paints a somewhat complicated picture. While professional reviewers, like the folks over at Rough Edge, praised their incredible, tight musicianship, hardcore fans on Reddit were highly divided. Some actually viewed it as an exhausting, poorly produced mess, arguing that Joey just sounded completely tired. In fact, some of those fans felt the guest stars were pretty awkwardly integrated. They viewed them as kind of a cheap way to boost album and documentary sales, rather than a genuine, organic tribute. It really goes to show just how subjective a band's final moments can be to the people who love them the most. Now, the whole chaotic affair, including earlier backstage tensions and arguments while stuck in a van surrounded by a crazy mob in Italy, was actually captured on 35mm film. It was released as the rare We're Outta Here documentary, which really reveals the gritty, totally unpolished reality of the band's final days together. But the story descends into a much more poignant reality when we look at the bitter aftermath. Through the raw, unfiltered grief of CJ Ramone following Joey's tragic passing years later, we learn that despite all their issues, they really were a family. It made the grieving process incredibly, deeply personal. CJ actually revealed a deeply heartbreaking reality later on. He felt totally cheated out of a final goodbye to Joey. Why? Well, because the remaining Ramones were allegedly disinvited from a tribute at Joey's 50th birthday bash, all due to some very bitter, unresolved family tensions. It really grounds this larger-than-life rock myth in some very real, human frustration. The fans and the band were robbed of a true climactic moment. CJ had envisioned them all playing together, maybe with a spotlight on an empty microphone to honor Joey. But Sadly, it just never happened. Looking back at that stage on that August night, true to their punk ethos, there was absolutely no tearful lamenting. There were no grand, sentimental speeches. There was just over an hour of severe, deafening rock music and a quick, simple, good night, thank you, right before they walked off forever. Which leaves us with one final, fascinating question to ponder. How did a group of guys with such a chaotic, messy, and totally unceremonious end manage to become the definitive blueprint for almost every single rock band that followed them? Perhaps it's a testament to the fact that sometimes the music really does speak louder than everything else. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I'll catch you next time.